The proposition. Penelope Wright stared at her laptop screen, the email blurring before her tired eyes. We regret to inform you that we've decided to go with another wedding planning service. The Hendersons' wedding, a $500,000 event that would have saved Rightway Events from financial ruin, was gone. At 31, Penelope had inherited her mother's once thriving event planning business, only to watch it crumble under mounting debts and canceled contracts. 3 years of economic downturn had left luxury services like hers struggling, and this cancellation was the final blow. Penny? Her assistant Olivia appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her face. The bank called again. Penelope closed the laptop. Tell them I'll call back tomorrow. What she'd tell them, she had no idea. The business loan was already 3 months behind. The office phone rang again. Olivia answered, then covered the receiver. It's someone from Sinclair Technologies. They want to speak with you personally. Penelope frowned. Sinclair Technologies was one of the fastest-growing companies in the country, headed by the notoriously private Gabriel Sinclair. What would they want with a failing event planning business? This is Penelope Wright, she said, taking the call. Miss Wright, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Sinclair. He'd like to meet with you today regarding a potential business opportunity. 3 hours later, Penelope sat in the sleek reception area of Sinclair Technologies' downtown headquarters. The glass and steel structure towered 40 stories above the city, a testament to Gabriel Sinclair's meteoric rise in the tech industry. Ms. Wright? A polished executive assistant appeared. Mr. Sinclair will see you now. Gabriel Sinclair stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. At 36, he had the confident posture of someone used to power. Dark hair with premature silver at the temples framed sharp features and penetrating hazel eyes that assessed Penelope as she entered. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Ms. Wright, he said, not offering his hand. Please sit. Penelope perched on the edge of an expensive leather chair. I'm curious why Sinclair Technologies needs an event planner. It's not the company that needs your services. It's me. Gabriel sat across from her, unbuttoning his suit jacket. I've researched you thoroughly. Your company is failing, but your reputation for discretion and quality remains impeccable. Heat rose to Penelope's cheeks. I appreciate the compliment, but I'm acquiring Thornhill Innovations next month, he interrupted. Old money, traditional values. The Thornhill family has rejected 2 previous acquisition offers because they didn't feel I was... He paused. The right fit for their company culture. And you want me to plan an event that impresses them? Gabriel's expression remained impassive. No, I need a wife. Penelope blinked. Excuse me? Temporary, of course. A 3-month contract. He slid a folder across the desk. The Thornhill's value family legacy. Their current CEO, Eleanor Thornhill, has made it clear she prefers to sell to someone with stable family values. My being unmarried is a problem. Penelope laughed, then realized he was serious. You want to hire me to be your fake wife? That's insane. I want to hire you to plan and execute a convincing wedding and brief marriage. Your compensation would be substantial. He named a figure that made Penelope's breath catch. Plus complete clearance of your business debts. Why me? You understand event management, have no family entanglements, and frankly, you need the money. His directness was almost cruel. The contract would include confidentiality clauses and a clean dissolution after the Thornhill acquisition. Penelope stood. Mr. Sinclair, I plan weddings. I don't participate in them. Gabriel remained seated, unperturbed. I understand your hesitation. Take 24 hours to consider. The alternative, as I understand it, is bankruptcy. Penelope clutched her portfolio tighter. And if I refuse? Then I find someone else, and you lose your mother's legacy. He finally stood, extending a business card. My private number. I'll need your answer by tomorrow evening. As the elevator descended, Penelope's mind raced. The proposition was preposterous, possibly illegal, and definitely unethical. But as the doors opened to the lobby, she looked down at the business card in her trembling hand. Her company, her employees, her mother's dream. Could she really say no? The arrangement, the Sinclair Wright wedding, took place on a private estate overlooking the Pacific, just 6 weeks after Penelope had reluctantly agreed to Gabriel's proposition. Despite the abbreviated timeline, the ceremony was nothing short of spectacular. Penelope had ensured that, if she was going to participate in this charade, it would at least be a beautifully executed one. "You've outdone yourself," murmured Olivia, adjusting Penelope's veil before the ceremony. "No one would ever guess this was arranged." Penelope smoothed the silk of her gown, a custom marchesa that Gabriel had insisted on purchasing despite her protests. "That's the point, isn't it?" The guest list was deliberately curated. Gabriel's business associates, a few celebrities known to generate press, and most importantly, the entire Thornhill family. Eleanor Thornhill, the silver-haired matriarch of Thornhill Innovations, watched with shrewd eyes as Gabriel and Penelope exchanged vows beneath an arch of white roses. "Do you, Gabriel James Sinclair, take Penelope Ann Wright to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Gabriel's eyes, usually so calculating, held Penelope's with unexpected intensity. "I do." The words echoed in Penelope's mind as she repeated her own vows. This wasn't real, she reminded herself. It was a business transaction, the most elaborate event she'd ever planned, with herself as the centerpiece. At the reception, Gabriel played his role flawlessly. His hand rested possessively at the small of her back as they circulated among guests. He laughed at the right moments, gazed at her with practiced adoration, and even managed to seem genuinely moved during the first dance. "You're quite the actor," Penelope whispered as they swayed to a ballad. "I've had to be in business." His voice was low, meant only for her. "The Thornhills are watching. Eleanor seems pleased." Penelope glanced toward the family table where Eleanor Thornhill was indeed observing them with approval. "Then it's working." "Of course it is." His confidence was infuriating. "You should smile more naturally, though. You look tense." "Forgive me if I'm not completely comfortable with fraud." Gabriel's arm tightened around her waist. "It's not fraud. It's strategy." "Is there a difference in your world?" Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps annoyance, perhaps something else. "You agreed to this arrangement, Penelope. The contract was clear." "I know what I signed." She forced a radiant smile as a photographer approached. "But that doesn't mean I have to like it." Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were alone in the honeymoon suite, the awkwardness of their situation became impossible to ignore. Two strangers, legally bound, with a king-sized bed between them. "I'll take the sofa," Gabriel said, loosening his tie. Penelope, removing her earrings at the vanity, watched his reflection. "The bed is enormous. We can share it without coming, within 6 feet of each other." "Fine." He disappeared into the bathroom with a small travel bag. When he emerged in silk pajamas, Penelope was already beneath the covers on the far side of the bed, scrolling through her phone. She'd changed into modest satin pajamas, nothing like the lingerie a real bride might wear. "The first phase is complete," Gabriel said, sliding beneath the sheets on his side. "Tomorrow we leave for Santorini. The Thornhills have a summer home. There, we'll, coincidentally, run into them." Penelope set her phone aside. "And what's my role during this honeymoon, besides smiling more naturally?" Gabriel turned off his bedside lamp, his profile sharp in the remaining light. "Just be yourself, minus the obvious disdain for me. We need to appear genuinely connected. That might require better acting skills than I possess." In the semi-darkness, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth lift slightly. You underestimate yourself. You convinced everyone tonight, even Eleanor Thornhill, and you underestimate how difficult it is to pretend to love someone you barely know. Gabriel was quiet for so long that Penelope thought he might have fallen asleep. Then his voice came soft through the darkness. Love isn't part of this equation, Penelope. Mutual respect and convincing performance are all we need. Is that how you approach all your relationships? As equations? He didn't answer, and Penelope didn't push. The silence stretched between them, two strangers bound by contract, each, on their own island in a sea of expensive sheets. Before drifting to sleep, Penelope wondered what she'd gotten herself into. 3 months pretending to be deeply in love with Gabriel Sinclair, a man who viewed emotions as variables to be managed and relationships as strategic alliances. She'd saved her business, yes. But at what cost to her integrity? To her heart? Little. Did she know, as the Santorini sun rose the next morning, that the lines between performance and reality would soon begin to blur in ways neither of them had anticipated? Cracks in the facade, the Santorini villa perched on the caldera's edge like a white jewel against the impossible blue of the Aegean. It was picture perfect, which was precisely the point, as paparazzi mysteriously discovered their location. On the second day. Convenient, Penelope remarked dryly, as Gabriel suggested they take breakfast on the sun-drenched terrace, clearly visible from the public path below where photographers lingered. Visibility is part of the strategy, he replied, pouring her coffee with surprising attentiveness. Smile like you're madly in love. Penelope complied, tilting her head back with practiced laughter as though Gabriel had said something charming. The cameras clicked in the distance. Days passed in a carefully choreographed dance, romantic dinners at sunset restaurants, walks, along the beach with fingers intertwined, stolen kisses when they didn't realize they were being observed. For the benefit of hotel staff and locals, they maintained the facade even in private spaces. On their 5th evening, they, coincidentally, dined at the same restaurant as the Thornhills. Eleanor Thornhill invited them to join their table, her approval evident in the warm welcome. "Young love," Eleanor said, raising her wine glass. "Nothing quite like it, is there?" Gabriel's arm draped casually around Penelope's shoulders. "I never expected to find it, honestly." "The best things come when we stop searching," Eleanor replied, studying them. "Tell me, Penelope, how did you tame this notorious workaholic?" Penelope felt Gabriel tense slightly beside her. This wasn't in their prepared script. She took a breath and decided to improvise. "I didn't try to change him," she said truthfully. "His dedication is part of who he is. I just reminded him there's more to life than quarterly reports." Gabriel's gaze shifted to her, something unreadable in his expression. Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Wise woman, my late husband was the same, brilliant in business, but needed reminding to live." She turned to Gabriel. "The acquisition papers should be ready next week. I believe you'll be an excellent steward for our company." Later that night, walking back to their villa under a canopy of stars, Gabriel maintained their charade by keeping his arm around Penelope's waist, even though no cameras were visible. "You handled that well," he said. Eleanor was impressed. I didn't say it for Eleanor. The admission hung between them as they continued in silence. That night, a violent thunderstorm rolled in from the sea. Penelope woke to the crash of thunder and the realization that Gabriel wasn't in bed. Lightning illuminated the room in sharp bursts, revealing his absence. She found him on the covered portion of the terrace, gripping the railing as rain lashed sideways. He wore only pajama bottoms, his hair plastered to his forehead, shoulders rigid with tension. "Gabriel?" She approached cautiously. "Are you all right?" He didn't turn. "Go back to bed." Another lightning flash revealed what looked like panic in his expression. His breathing was shallow, hands white-knuckled on the railing. Understanding dawned. You're afraid of storms. I'm not afraid of anything, he snapped, but his voice wavered as thunder boomed overhead. Penelope stepped closer. It's okay to be human, you know. I can't afford weakness. The words seemed torn from him. Not ever. Something in his vulnerability cracked her own careful facade. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his on the railing. Being human isn't weakness, Gabriel. Another crack of thunder made him flinch. Instinctively, Penelope moved closer, her arm sliding around his waist. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. When I was 8, he said, voice barely audible above the storm, my father locked me on the balcony during a thunderstorm. Said it would toughen me up. I was out there for hours. Horror and compassion washed through her. That's not toughening. Up. That's abuse. Gabriel's laugh was bitter. It was a lesson in self-reliance, one of many. Without thinking, Penelope turned him toward her, her hands on his rain-slicked shoulders. Look at me, Gabriel. When he finally met her gaze, she continued, that lesson was wrong. Something broke in his expression, a hairline fracture in the perfect control he always maintained. For a moment, he was just a man with old wounds, not the calculating CEO who had orchestrated their arrangement. When his arms encircled her, pulling her against his chest, Penelope told herself it was just part of their performance, a moment of method acting. But there were no cameras here, no witnesses to convince. They stood wrapped in each other's arms until the storm passed, neither acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted between them, something that hadn't been negotiated in their contract. Back in the bedroom, they returned to their respective sides of the mattress, but the invisible barrier between them seemed somehow thinner. In the darkness, Penelope found herself wondering about the man beneath the calculating exterior, and why suddenly, the thought of their contract's eventual end left her feeling unexpectedly hollow. Conflicted hearts. 2 weeks into their Santorini honeymoon, Penelope found herself in the uncomfortable position of forgetting at times that her marriage was a sham. Small moments of genuine connection had begun to accumulate. Gabriel bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it without being asked. Penelope, intuitively knowing when to give him space during business calls, shared laughter over a local tour guide's outlandish stories. The acquisition of Thornhill Innovations was proceeding smoothly. Eleanor Thornhill had personally called to inform Gabriel that the board had unanimously approved the final terms. We should celebrate, Gabriel suggested after the call, uncorking a bottle of champagne. The Thornhill deal is why we're here, after all. Of course, Penelope replied, accepting a flute. Congratulations. His eyes studied her over the rim of his glass. You don't seem particularly enthusiastic. I'm happy for you, she said carefully. This is what you wanted. What we both wanted, he corrected. Once the acquisition finalizes, next month your company's debts will be cleared as agreed. You'll be free to return to your life. The word free struck Penelope oddly. She should be counting the days until this charade ended, but instead she felt a knot forming in her stomach. That evening, they were invited to dine with a shipping magnate and his wife at their cliffside mansion. As their car wound up the steep roads, Gabriel placed his hand over Penelope's. You're quiet tonight, he observed. Penelope gazed out at the darkening sea. Just thinking about what happens after. All this. Having second thoughts about our arrangement? No, she said too quickly. I've gotten used to this. It will be strange to go back. Gabriel's thumb traced small circles on her wrist, a gesture that had become familiar. Back to reality. The dinner was elaborate, the conversation flowing easily as they performed, their well-rehearsed roles of the besotted newlyweds. Yet something felt different. Penelope caught Gabriel watching her with an intensity that wasn't merely for show. his hand finding hers under the table when no one could possibly see. Later, on the moonlit terrace overlooking the Aegean, their host's wife pulled Penelope aside. "You two are remarkable together," the woman said, sipping her digestive. "How long have you known each other?" "Not long enough," Penelope answered truthfully. But sometimes you just know, don't you? When I met Dmitri, I knew within weeks he was the one." She smiled knowingly. "I see the way Gabriel looks at you when you're not watching. That man is utterly captivated." Penelope's heart skipped. "He's very good at—" She caught herself before saying, pretending, expressing his feelings. "That's rare in men of his position. Hold on to that, dear." The drive back to their villa was charged with unspoken tension. Gabriel's phone buzzed continuously with messages about the acquisition, but for once, he ignored it. In the privacy of their bedroom, Penelope finally broke the silence. "You know, in less than a month, we won't have to pretend anymore." Gabriel loosened his tie slowly. "Is that what you think we're doing? Pretending? Isn't it?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He crossed the room until he stood directly before her, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of his cologne. "I'm not sure anymore." Penelope's pulse quickened. "Gabriel, we had an agreement. A contract. Contracts can be renegotiated." His hand lifted to brush a strand of hair from her face, lingering against her cheek, or extended. The implication was clear, and for a moment Penelope allowed herself to imagine it, staying in this beautiful fantasy, continuing whatever was developing between them. Then reality crashed back. For what purpose? The Thornhill acquisition is almost complete. You won't need a wife after that. Something flashed in his eyes, hurt perhaps, or frustration. "Is that all you think this is? A business transaction?" "That's exactly what you told me it was." The weeks of confusion and conflicted feelings erupted. "You literally gave me a contract stating when and how our relationship would end. This was never meant to be real." Gabriel stepped back as though she'd struck him. "And if I said I wanted it to be?" Penelope stared at him, heart hammering. "I'd say you're confusing a convenient arrangement with actual feelings." "You don't believe I'm capable of real feelings, do you?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I don't know what you're capable of, Gabriel. That's the problem." She moved toward the bathroom, needing space. "What I do know is that relationships built on lies rarely survive once the truth comes out. Penelope, we should stick to the original plan," she interrupted, afraid of what he might say, more afraid of how desperately she wanted to hear it. "One more week here, then back to maintain appearances until the acquisition closes. Then we part ways, as agreed." She closed the bathroom door before he could respond, leaning against it as tears threatened. On the other side, she heard Gabriel's footsteps retreat, followed by the gentle click of the terrace door. Through the window, she watched his silhouette against the night sky, shoulders rigid, head bowed. For a man who had orchestrated every aspect of his life with meticulous precision, he suddenly looked lost. Penelope pressed her palm against the cool surface of the mirror, confronting her own reflection. The woman who stared back was no longer the desperate business owner who had accepted an outrageous proposition to save her company. She was someone else entirely, someone who had made the grave mistake of falling for a man who had purchased her presence in his life. Or had he? The doubt crept in, insidious and hopeful all at once. What if the cracks in his facade weren't an act? What if Gabriel Sinclair, master strategist, had failed to anticipate one crucial variable in his perfect equation, that they might both forget they were pretending? Beyond the contract, the final week in Santorini passed in a blur of strained politeness and careful distance. Where they had once moved in comfortable synchronicity, they now orbited each other like cautious planets, never quite colliding, but unable to break free of each other's gravity. The flight back to the States was silent, except for occasional business discussions. The Thornhill acquisition would close in exactly 9 days, the same day their contract stipulated their marriage would discreetly end. Back in the penthouse apartment they shared for appearance's sake, Penelope immersed herself in catching up with right-way events. The business was recovering thanks to the financial injection Gabriel had provided and the publicity from their high-profile wedding. Ironically, they now had more wedding bookings than ever. "You've barely been home. 10 minutes and you're already working," Gabriel observed from the doorway of her home office. Penelope didn't look up from her laptop. "Some of us don't have the luxury of acquiring multi-billion-dollar companies. Small businesses require constant attention." He stepped into the room, setting a cup of tea beside her, prepared exactly as she liked it. Eleanor Thornhill called. "She's throwing a gala to celebrate the acquisition next week. She specifically requested your involvement in planning it. I'm sure any event planner would suffice." "She asked for you." Gabriel's voice softened. "She likes you, Penelope. Everyone does." Penelope finally met his gaze. "Will this be our last public appearance together?" Something flickered in his expression. "If that's what you want." "What I want?" She laughed hollowly. "That hasn't really been the point of all this, has it?" Gabriel sat on the edge of her desk, closer than he'd been in days. "Tell me what you want, Penelope. Not what our contract says, not what makes business sense. What do you want?" The question hung between them, dangerous in its simplicity. "I want—" She swallowed hard. "I want something real, not performed for cameras or business associates, not calculated for maximum strategic advantage. And you don't believe that's possible with me." It wasn't a question, but Penelope answered anyway. "I don't know who you really are, Gabriel. I've seen glimpses during the thunderstorm, in quiet moments when you thought no one was watching. But I don't know if that man exists outside our arrangement, or if he disappears once the contract ends." Gabriel was silent for a long moment. Then, "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." Curious, despite herself, Penelope followed him to his home office, a room she'd rarely entered. He unlocked a drawer and withdrew a manila envelope. "Open it," he said. Inside, Penelope found legal documents, but not their marriage contract. It was ownership transfer paperwork for Thornhill Innovations, dated 3 weeks earlier. "I don't understand," she said, skimming the dense legal text. "This says the acquisition was already completed before we went to Santorini." Gabriel's expression was unreadable. "It was. But that means—" Realization dawned slowly, then all at once. "You didn't need me to convince the Thornhills. You already had their approval." "Yes." Penelope felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. "Why the charade, then? Why make me believe—" "Because I'd researched you for months." "Before we met," Gabriel interrupted, his composure finally cracking. "I'd seen your work, your dedication to your family's legacy. I watched you fight to save your business against impossible odds. I admired you before I ever met you." "So you—" "What? Decided to buy yourself a wife you admired?" Anger and confusion warred within her. "No." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I created a situation where I could get to know you without the imbalance of power that would exist if I simply approached you as myself. Where you would see me as a person, not just as Gabriel Sinclair, CEO. By lying to me, by giving us both a role to play until we could discover what might exist beyond those roles." He stepped closer. "I didn't anticipate actually falling in love with you." The word hung in the air between them. Love. Not strategy, not arrangement, not contract. "In Santorini," Penelope said slowly, "when I told you to stick to the original plan, You broke my heart, he finished simply. Because by then, none of it was pretend for me anymore. Penelope stood very still, recalibrating everything. She thought she knew. The thunderstorm? Real. My father really did that. I've never told anyone before you. The Thornhills' approval of our relationship? Also real, though unnecessary for the acquisition. And now? She asked, her voice barely audible. What's real now, Gabriel? He took her hands in his, and for the first time since she'd known him, his expression was completely unguarded. Vulnerable. Real. What's real is that I love you, Penelope Wright, not for what you can do for my business image or for any strategic advantage. I love your determination, your integrity, the way you roll your eyes when I say something particularly corporate. His smile was tentative. I love that you saw through me from the beginning but still found something worth caring about. Penelope searched his face, looking for any trace of calculation or performance. She found none. Our contract ends in 9 days, she said softly. Tear it up. His hands tightened on hers. Stay because you want to, not because you're obligated. Or walk away if that's what you truly want. But please, decide based on what's real between us now, not how we began. Penelope thought of all the moments that had confused her, the genuine laughter, the comfort in silence, the way he'd held her during the storm. The man before her now was neither the cold strategist who had proposed their arrangement, nor the perfect husband they'd performed for others. He was simply Gabriel, complicated, flawed, and somehow more compelling for it. I don't know if I can trust this, she admitted. How do I know this isn't just another deeper level of strategy? Gabriel released her hands and stepped back. You don't. That's the risk of real love, isn't it? There are no guarantees, no contracts that can protect your heart. The space between them felt vast and insignificant all at once. Ask me again, Penelope said finally. Gabriel's brow furrowed. Ask you what? Ask me what I want, not what our contract says, not what makes business sense. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He took a breath, vulnerable in a way the Gabriel Sinclair she'd first met would never allow himself to be. What do you want, Penelope? She closed the distance between them, her decision made. I want to tear up that contract and start over. No pretending, no performing, no strategic calculations. Her hand came to rest against his cheek. I want to discover who we are together when there's nothing at stake except our hearts. The kiss that followed wasn't for cameras or business, associates. It wasn't calculated for anyone's benefit or orchestrated as part of a greater plan. It was simply real, uncertain and imperfect, and full of possibility. 3 months later, Right Way Events hosted an intimate vow renewal ceremony on the rooftop garden of Sinclair Tower. There was no press, no business associates, just a handful of people who mattered most to them. This time, when Penelope and Gabriel promised to love and cherish each other, every word was true. No contracts, no conditions, just 2 people who had found something authentic in the most inauthentic of beginnings. As they danced under the stars, Gabriel whispered against her hair, "Was it worth it? All the pretending to get to what's real?" Penelope smiled up at him. I'm still deciding. Ask me again in 50 years. His answering laugh was genuine, the laugh of a man who had finally found something more valuable than any business acquisition. Something that couldn't be bought, sold, or contracted. Something real.